SpongeBob and Patrick's timeline twist-up was an episode that some fans found to be insulting. Not because of the quality of its writing or the contents of any specific jokes, but because of the message it communicated in regards to the show's own past. Was the reaction to this episode justified, or is it the result of a finicky audience not responding well to change? Chapter 1. The Concept. So, SpongeBob and Patrick's timeline twist-up revolves around 4 members of Patrick's family, all of which are characters who were introduced in the spin-off Patrick Star Show, traveling back in time to 4 different Season 1 SpongeBob episodes, and thus changing the outcomes of each of those stories. Already, we can see why one might raise an eyebrow to this premise, seeing these characters who are so representative of the new current SpongeBob universe plopped into these iconic episodes. But that doesn't mean this is a bad idea altogether, no? Look, putting these characters in these situations is not an arbitrary choice. The team behind the show did this in order to communicate something about these new characters and make a statement about how they are here to stay. How you feel about that depends on how you feel about these characters. How do I feel about these characters? Well, so here's the thing. I've never actually seen any SpongeBob spin-off material, nor have I seen any other modern SpongeBob episodes that features these Patrick family members prominently until now. I thought about watching some of the Patrick Star Show as research for this video so that I could have a little bit more context as to who these characters are and how I should feel about them. But I actually decided that I think it would be better if I didn't. After all, the point of having these characters in the main SpongeBob show is to entice spin-off averse viewers, like me, into giving the other shows a chance. Did it succeed with me? Well, I'll save the answer to that question to the end. So, my attitude towards spin-offs in the SpongeBob universe is pretty negative, but not for any reasons regarding whether or not Steven Hillenburg, the original creator, wanted spin-offs or not. I don't need to open that whole can of worms. I mean, it's IPs can continue. It really, that's not really my issue with it. No, my aversion to SpongeBob spin-offs is really just because I think SpongeBob as a show just isn't that kind of show. It's not really conducive to having a spin-off, mostly because its main show conceptually covers such a vast and broad world and can be so flexible with its characters. What could you possibly spin off that wouldn't just be, the same as the main show? Like, sure, SpongeBob himself is the main character. It's named after him. But you can take just about any of the characters and make them the star of an episode and have them undergo a character arc, and it works. This is why you have episodes focused on Squidward, on Mr. Krabs, on Patrick. Even episodes fully revolving around less frequent characters like the Flying Dutchman. This is just an extremely versatile cast of cartoon characters and an extremely vast world. So when your main cast is that versatile and your world is that vast, what more can you do in a different show? Every episode's like a different show. This is why I take so much issue with the idea of Camp Coral. It's clear to me that you're just taking SpongeBob, utilizing cheaper 3D animation, babyfying them, and boom, you can now make another SpongeBob show at the same time as your other show. You get all of the brand recognition with, in theory, double the value. I mean, it didn't really work, but you get the idea. And look, I've never seen an episode of Camp Coral. Maybe it's amazing. I don't know. But it didn't hook me in, and that's really the main reason I didn't watch it. Again, I'm not going to criticize it too deeply. I'll have to actually watch the show to tell you everything wrong with it. I'm only criticizing the premise here. So if you think it's amazing, let me know in the comments below. Or if you think it's horrible and it's worth talking about, I don't know. Let me know. Patrick Star Show, on the other hand, is the spin-off that I feel a little more nuanced towards. First off, while it does have some differences in art style, it looks a lot like regular SpongeBob. I mean, looks pretty good, I just haven't fully warmed up to the idea of Patrick being the main character. He's just not main character material. The reason that Patrick is so iconic and often considered the funniest character in classic SpongeBob is because He's a side character, there to escalate the nautical nonsense with his more wild card personality. And sure, there's a couple of episodes where he takes the spotlight and has an arc of his own, but those are for specific, self-contained stories, not the foundation of the entire series. However, my criticism here is nothing more than slight skepticism, rather than a complete rejection of the premise of this spin-off entirely. Again, never watched either spin-off, but thinking in terms of a consumer who may be interested in either of these shows, I can at least see some reason to take a look at the Patrick Star Show. One element of the Patrick Star Show that I've seen complaints about are how it retcons Patrick's original parents. And, like, if you really do think that, come on, do you really not see why they had to change them? The original Patrick's parents are just middle-aged Patrick and woman Patrick. Fine character design for a couple of one-offs, but definitely would not work at all as leads in a show. The new designs have much more personality. And there's also people who complain about, he's got this new sister instead of the other one that we saw before, and like, do you really want to remember the Big Sister Sam episode? Because I don't. It's the same thing. The Squidina character is created to be a main character in the spin-off show. Like, do you really think that the writers should be stuck with this as one of their most prominent characters just because of one bad episode that came out over a decade ago? And look, I get it. I'm a continuity guy. I think it's good to keep consistent continuity in your show, even if it is a cartoon. I complain about all the different Plankton secret formula backstories all the time, but the difference there is that I think all the Plankton secret formula retcons are just a product of the writers not caring about keeping consistent lore in the show. While these Patrick family members are pretty standard and forgivable creative retcons that happen when a show goes on as long as this one does and gets spin-offs. The only real thing to criticize is how the characters are actually written. So let's get into the episode and see what I think of them. Chapter 2, Return to Rock Bottom. So, once SpongeBob notices his scrapbook full of alternate timelines, he and Patrick investigate Patrick's parents' house where a bunch of household appliances attack them for some reason. No, really, this doesn't make any sense. Like, later it's shown that the time machine, which I guess they just kind of have in their house, goes all crazy and attacks because Patrick's parents treated it badly. But why does that affect a toaster and a toilet? I don't know. Just seemed like they were padding the time in this 44-minute special. Also, is this time machine just like a thing in the Patrick Star Show? Like, does Patrick just have a time machine in his bedroom? Okay, look, if there's a good explanation for that, then I will rescind this criticism. But you can't just have a time machine for no reason. Do I really have to tell you that? It completely negates the narrative weight of the object if it just kind of exists for no reason. And in a cartoon, you really don't need that much reason. Like, for example, the time machine in SB129, that's first door on the left, or the switch lives just to see what it's like machine Plankton built last Tuesday. These reality-defying machines both have silly, casual introductions, but they do both have context to why they exist. The time machine in Patrick's room, as far as I know, has no context for its existence and just seems to be there so they could do the episode. And if I'm aware of that, takes me out of the narrative. Anyway, the first season 1 episode referenced is Rock Bottom, which is traveled to by Squidina. The immediate premise I can get behind. Since Squidina shows up, she changes history so both SpongeBob and Patrick get on the bus back to Bikini Bottom, leaving Squidina to usurp what was originally SpongeBob's role in the episode. Here's where it loses me. The episode refuses to engage with its source material at all. Now, obviously, we don't just want to see a shot-for-shot remake of Rock Bottom, but with Squidina instead, and to their credit, they don't do that. But they instead just make up a completely new plot that doesn't in any way tie into the original Rock Bottom story. Another thing to their credit is that they did try to give Squidina a character flaw of her own by having her be so wrapped up in getting footage of Rock Bottom for her own video projects that she is oblivious to the danger of being there. However, her being oblivious to danger also kind of removes all the stakes from the sequence. Squidina meets up with this gang of rock bottomites and they pull some pranks on people and whatnot until SpongeBob and Patrick grab her and bring her back to her own time. So there are so many things that this gets wrong in regards to what made the original Rock Bottom episode work narratively. First off, Rock Bottom, the season 1 episode, did a fantastic job of making SpongeBob feel alone, and they achieved that because of the way that they presented the other fish who populated Rock Bottom. They were scary-looking strangers with a language barrier. These Rock Bottomites in this episode, who Squidina immediately starts talking to, don't have any such language barrier other than a quick, "Oh, my Rock Bottomies is rusty," and then she communicates just fine with them. Where's the story about how we shouldn't judge people just because they're different from us? Seems like this episode wants to tell us Rock Bottomites are actually pretty bad people, if the main ones we see are these ne'er-do-wells and a big fish that eats people. Also, one moment really stood out to me here when they pulled their one prank that got the red anglerfish eaten. This is probably the first time in the episode that I felt a little insulted as a viewer, not gonna lie. This red anglerfish is the character who helped SpongeBob get back to Bikini Bottom at the end of the original Rock Bottom episode. The point of this character's existence was to teach the main lesson of the episode, which is that even if people might be different from you, it doesn't mean they are inherently bad, or that they wouldn't be willing to help you if you're in trouble. And I think it's kind of telling that this episode not only ignores that theme and basically teaches the opposite perspective, that people who are different from you actually are bad and scary, portrays this symbol of that original lesson literally dying. Then, when Squidina gets carried off by SpongeBob and Patrick back to the present, they then look at the scrapbook, and it turns back to SpongeBob. But they took Squidina out of Rock Bottom after she changed the outcome of the past. They didn't reverse the change to the past at all. SpongeBob still left Rock Bottom on the bus with Patrick, so he would not have been there to be tied to this balloon where this picture would have been taken. Which also begs the question, who even took the picture? You know what? That's not even the most pressing inconsistency. I am baffled that the writers of this episode actually think that I, or anyone else, would be stupid enough to actually think that this logic makes sense. This isn't like some kind of philosophy of time travel, what if scenario, if you time travel, do you create an alternate universe? Or if you time travel back to the past from the future, wouldn't you have always time traveled? So you would have always been in the past, so you can't actually change anything? Or if you met yourself in the past, would you create a paradox and destroy the universe? No. You can be flexible with that kind of stuff in your story, because that's all just science fiction details that depends on your own interpretation of how time travel could work. This just doesn't make logical sense. Seriously, is there a single person of any age who watched this episode and didn't immediately clock that as an inconsistency? Like, I know I'm harping on this so much. It bugged me so much. How do you even get past the first draft? It's embarrassing. I mean, I would like to be a fly on the wall in the writer's room when someone inevitably questioned this decision. What did, the head writer or the producer, or whoever okayed this, what do you even say to that? Seriously, I want to know your excuse for this. What could you possibly say other than, I don't care about the thing we're making, so let's just leave it like that? I can't think of another justification. I really can't. Chapter 3. Return to Ripped Pants. The next episode they return to is Ripped Pants, where Patrick's dad takes SpongeBob's place as the titular pants ripper. Unlike the return to Rock Bottom, this segment does actually engage with the theme of its original episode, but I kind of take issue with the way that they did that. So the original story of Ripped Pants is about how a joke can get old if you keep doing it over and over again, and even if something was funny the first time, it won't continue to be funny. It's a really important lesson for young people to learn, and through something as memorable as the ripped pants and the way the narrative slowly shows every other character getting sick of it, the episode flawlessly communicates this message in a way that even a 5-year-old can understand. The ripped pants section of this episode, though, decided to go with a different message. So, the second time Patrick's dad rips his pants, this is said.
Was anybody else? Not joke would grow stale and tiresome before long.
Basically, this episode is trying to say that because it's Patrick's dad, the rule of jokes becoming less funny when you overuse them just simply does not apply, and he's able to make a career ripping his pants. Yeah, I can see why modern SpongeBob wouldn't want to reinforce a lesson of don't tell the same joke, and instead try to imply that you can totally tell the same joke over and over again and be successful. Just look at how much they overuse my leg gags, and you'll see why they'd like to convince you of that. Another thing that one might find insulting about this is the implication that there is something about Patrick's dad, who is a representative of new SpongeBob canon, being compared to SpongeBob as being inherently funnier. Honestly, I don't really find this insulting. I find it kind of sad. Like, it's not so much that the writers are trying to put down SpongeBob here. They know people like SpongeBob. They know how popular the character is. But by trying to put this character on a pedestal, they are trying to force a narrative that you should like this character. Oh, this guy, there's something special about him, even more special than the face of our franchise. It's just overcompensating. And look, from what I can see of Patrick's dad in this episode, he doesn't seem like a really bad character or anything. Like, sure, he seems a little similar to Patrick himself and kind of comes off as a one-dimensional doofus dad type character we've seen a million times before. But I don't have anything against him. He could do something that would make me like him as a character. But the problem with this moment is that he isn't doing anything that earns this status as so funny he can make the same joke work over and over again. The narrative just kind of tells you should feel that way. And because it didn't do any work convincing me of why I should believe it, I don't. So then all the pants stuff escalates and the dad is like CEO of Rip Pants Incorporated or whatever, and then everyone is mad at him because they all rip their clothes and are cold in the winter. So what's the lesson here? There were consequences to him ripping his pants, but the consequences weren't related to it not being funny, and instead the consequences were related to the importance of having winter apparel? Is that a lesson? I suppose it's good advice, but it's not really like a moral or anything. Then the dad tries to prove the half-naked people wrong by ripping himself in half. First off, ew. Secondly, what does this have to do with the lesson of the section? Okay, it seems that even the writers kind of knew they lost the plot here because they decide to have SpongeBob and Patrick come in and just pull the dad back into the present, where it then does the same thing as the last section, where it acts like now the past is totally fixed and SpongeBob now ripped his pants like normal, when no, they didn't do anything to reverse that part of the timeline. The dad still prevented SpongeBob from ripping his own pants by doing it himself. I already harped on this. There's also one other big problem with this episode structure. Both this section and the one that came before it were their own self-contained stories, where the characters made choices that put them in dangerous situations. But the way those characters get out of those situations was just SpongeBob and Patrick showed up and pulled them out. And that's just not how storytelling works. When a character's choices gets them into a situation, their own choices need to get them out of that situation. You can't just go, well, time's up, now the situation is over. That leaves no room for a story. It leaves no room for anyone to learn anything. It just sort of stops. It just goes to show how averse these writers are to actually engaging with proper storytelling techniques. Chapter 4. Return to Neptune's Spatula. Patrick's mother then takes SpongeBob's place in Neptune's Spatula. I actually like how they wrote around the whole chosen one element of this episode. In the original episode, SpongeBob was able to pull the magic spatula from the grease because he is a true fry cook. And the narrative then goes on to prove why SpongeBob was worthy of the spatula when he cooks a better patty than Neptune himself. Now, At first, I thought they were going to pull the same nonsense they pulled with Rip Pants and have Patrick's mom be like the super awesome double chosen one, but they actually handled this one a little better. The reason Patrick's mom is able to pull the spatula is because she cleans the handle and the soap drips down and removes the grease. This is actually a really creative change. It's in character for the mom to do this. It preserves the original narrative of SpongeBob as the chosen one and shows an overall confidence in the character of Patrick's mom to stand on her own. So even though this section starts off strong, it does go on to miss the point of the original episode. Now, it does follow some similar beats. The mortal, in this case Patrick's mom, challenges the ego of the god Neptune by doing something better than him. But while the original episode made an explicit point to show that SpongeBob could beat Neptune because of his own heart and personal touch when making Krabby Patties, which is something that Neptune's magic could never replicate, Patrick's mom is just using Neptune's trident to do stuff. What is she really doing here that would be meaningfully different from what Neptune is capable of? She's saving children's lives, stopping floods and volcano eruptions and such, but she's doing it just because she has mythical god powers from the trident. It's not like SpongeBob, who's better at making Krabby Patties because of something exclusive to him. The narrative just doesn't communicate that there's anything about Patrick's mom in particular that makes her uniquely able to do all of this stuff. Like how in the original episode, it does communicate how SpongeBob is uniquely capable of crafting the perfect burger. Unless it's communicating that Neptune usually doesn't intervene in these situations, but that doesn't make sense either, because that means that Bikini Bottom would have been destroyed by a volcano in the original timeline if Patrick's mom didn't have the trident. I think Neptune says something about like getting a day off, so that implies that it's usually his job to stop these disasters, meaning that he would have just done it anyway and done it in the same fashion without Patrick's mom being around. So what is really the difference between Patrick's mom doing it and Neptune doing it? Why does any of this matter? So then Neptune gets jealous at Patrick's mom getting all the credit and challenges her to a competition in the same stadium where they had the patty making competition in the original episode. Okay, great. So now we have a chance to see what characteristics of Patrick's mom make her more capable than the ruler of the sea, and how, SpongeBob and Patrick just decide to arbitrarily end the segment by grabbing her here, just when it was getting good. Also, Neptune dies. So not only did they not fix the timeline like it acts like they did, shouldn't they be more concerned about the King of the Sea literally dying in the past instead of whether or not SpongeBob was standing in this one place at this one time to take this one photo? Chapter 5. Return to Help Wanted. Which brings us to the final classic episode this special calls back to. The very first episode of SpongeBob, Help Wanted. But instead of SpongeBob getting the job at the Krusty Krab, it's Grandpat. This was definitely the right choice for last episode to reference because it's where one of the most important canon events in the show happened, SpongeBob getting his job at the Krusty Krab. This raises the stakes because of how much we know this particular event needs to be reversed. Like, if SpongeBob never flew out of rock bottom, or never ripped his pants, or never pulled the golden spatula, sure, those individual lessons that he learned in those episodes and the memory of learning those lessons are important and are worth preserving. But his job at the Krusty Krab is everything that he is in this show. So, when the anchovies show up, Grandpat sneaks out the back door, which is that talking door for some unexplained reasons. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention there's like a talking door. That's a Patrick Star Show thing, I think. I don't have much more to say about this back door being the talking door other than it irked me. Then Plankton shows up and we kind of get a little bonus reference with the machine from Plankton's introductory episode appearing. Then Grandpat gets the Krabby Patty formula and takes over the world himself, turning it into some burger-themed dystopia that he rules over with an iron fist. SpongeBob and Patrick then show up but get arrested, only for it to cut away to the main timeline where they're like, well, we better not try that. Meaning like SpongeBob and Patrick, they were watching from the future, so they saw themselves from the future going into the past, and they decided not to do it themselves. And at first I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but hold on, does it? I guess, okay, so they're watching the past, and they attempted to go into the past later, so the future from here, they went into the past, so they would still be able to see it in the future, but not that far of the future. And by seeing that they would not have wanted to go in the time machine to that time period. So that's a paradox. And then, of course, their solution is to go even further back, which if they did go farther back, wouldn't they have always gone farther back? Because it establishes with the fact that they can see themselves going back in the later part of the past timeline. I'm talking the Grandpat takes over the world timeline, that when you go back in time, you would have always gone back in time. So why does that apply to the SpongeBob and Patrick who went to this part of the Grandpat timeline, but it doesn't apply to the SpongeBob and Patrick when they go to this time? You follow any of that? Because I didn't. I'm just going to give it about a 65% on the makes sense scale. A passing grade, but barely. So, at the very least, this section actually does give us a logical reason why this timeline got restored. All the other sections just expected us to believe that pulling the character into the time machine reversed everything, which makes no sense, but this one actually did make sense because of this moment right here, where modern SpongeBob meets classic SpongeBob and gives him the spatula and pep talks him into getting his job at the Krusty Krab. So, this is kind of the big moment that everyone talks about in this episode. The whole what if classic SpongeBob met modern SpongeBob thing, where people say that classic SpongeBob would like hate modern SpongeBob or something, and you find him annoying. You'd be like, you're too wacky, differently animated me. Obviously, they aren't going to write an episode where the older version of a character like roasts the newer version of the character or anything, but I do feel like this scene didn't really properly engage with how different the character has become over the years. It's a pretty nice scene in a lot of ways, especially how it highlights how important the job at the Krusty Krab is to SpongeBob, and how it is him encouraging himself to go and get it when his past self is at such a low point. But yeah, just a few little references to modern SpongeBob being different and zanier than classic SpongeBob, that would have been appreciated. Chapter 6. How to Fix SpongeBob and Patrick's Timeline Twist-Up. SpongeBob and Patrick's Timeline Twist-Up is a complete mess in terms of what it's trying to accomplish and how it goes about communicating its message. If I had complete control over the episode, I wouldn't have even had it be a special at all. This should have just been a standard 11-minute episode, and instead of featuring 4 classic episodes, it should have only focused on Grandpat stealing SpongeBob's job and help wanted. The episode could have opened on SpongeBob going to the Krusty Krab only to find that no one has any memory of him ever working there. And Mr. Krabs says something along the lines of, I don't need to deal with crazy people thinking they're me employees. I already have to deal with the place across the street stealing me secret formula. And SpongeBob would be like, oh no, Plankton stole the formula? And then it's this weird alternate restaurant. Basically, the whole story of Grandpat and Plankton and the formula would be slowly revealed to be the alternate changed past to SpongeBob, who would be the only one to still have his original memory because, well, we could explain that since SpongeBob was the one most directly affected by the change in the past, his memories hadn't caught up and gotten changed yet. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's far more logical than the nonsense that made it to air. Then it continues pretty much as normal with a couple different attempts of time traveling to stop Grandpat that all fail until SpongeBob decides to meet his past self and motivate him to go to the Krusty Krab, and maybe Patrick can meet his past self too and motivate his past self to stop Grandpat. However, I should acknowledge that there might be more at play here, and my solution of make it an 11-minute episode might not have actually worked. After all, writing an episode like this does not exist in a vacuum. It exists within a larger business conglomerate house of cards that's propping up one of the largest media franchises in the world. Most likely, a writer on this episode was told by people above them that they were required to write a 40-plus minute special that included all 4 of these Patrick Star Show characters, as well as references to past episodes. So, if I were a writer on the show, would I have been able to create something better than this within those restrictions? Well, let's see. So the biggest issues with this episode are the fact that their segments don't reflect their original episodes very well. So the first major change I would make is to be sure that every alternate storyline with each of the Patrick family members revolves around something similar to what SpongeBob went through in each respective story. Squidina should go through more similar beats to what SpongeBob went through in the original Rock Bottom. None of this prankster rock bottomite nonsense. But while SpongeBob's character flaw in the original episode was being a scatterbrain, Squidina's flaw could be that she is too focused on documenting Rock Bottom to get on the bus, with the ending being her getting an interview with the redfish,
Who did not die?
Oh, isn't that swell?
who tells her all about Rock Bottom culture before helping her fly away with the balloon. With Patrick's dad, instead of the world for some reason just giving him a pass for ripping his pants over and over again, they begin to find Patrick's dad just as annoying for constantly ripping his pants as they did with SpongeBob. But Patrick's dad would instead double down on the ripped pants, insist it's funny, and then go through making his big business around ripping pants and trying to force people to like it through his business power, leading to pretty much the same conclusion with the ripped clothes people coming after him. But this time the angry mob represents the lesson about not understanding when your concept needs to be put to rest. Then Patrick's mom should get into a similar patty making competition with Neptune, but she accidentally destroys her grill with cleaning supplies. Neptune thinks he's won the competition, and when Patrick goes to console his mother, he says something along the lines of, "Well, I always love your special smiley sandwiches," or some other kind of cute homemade thing moms make. And his mom is like, "Well, I always pack an extra just in case." So then she pulls out her special mom snack, and then Neptune notices and eats it and enjoys it just as much as he enjoyed the Krabby Patty in the original episode. So with these minor changes, all three of these storylines follow just about the same lesson as their original episodes, but they each engage with a different respective character flaw. Now, here's the kicker. Instead of SpongeBob and Patrick just reversing the timeline by pulling each respective character out, they instead bring them back to their own timeline once their own story has concluded, and then ask themselves if they should go back even further to put SpongeBob back in his rightful place, to which SpongeBob would decline, and allow the history to be rewritten with these characters in SpongeBob's place. When SpongeBob is asked why he would be willing to give up his past and the lessons he learned through living those experiences, SpongeBob would remark that he can still learn those lessons because he watched Squidina and Patrick's parents learn each of those respective lessons themselves, saying that you can learn just as many lessons by watching others as you can by living through it yourself. Get it? Like how when we watch the show, we can learn the lessons? Now, I think some would find this rewrite insulting, as it literally states that in the canon of SpongeBob, these three episodes basically didn't happen to SpongeBob and now happen to these three characters that you may not like very much. But honestly, I think if they wrote it this way, you'd probably feel a little more open-minded to these characters and to the idea of them being interwoven into the current SpongeBob landscape. Again, it's not these characters that are the problem. It's how the show is written. Of course, with these first three episodes fully rewritten, the final journey to Help Wanted would still have SpongeBob fully change the past and take his rightful place within that story. That one cannot be changed. This, combined with modern SpongeBob encouraging classic SpongeBob, would give the proper respect to classic SpongeBob while also acknowledging where modern SpongeBob as a series could go. So, this episode was an opportunity for modern SpongeBob to win over classic SpongeBob fans. Since it's a special, and since it references these classic episodes, obviously there's gonna be some classic SpongeBob fans who don't really follow modern SpongeBob that are gonna check it out. And perhaps they're checking it out because they're a little rage baited by the sight of these characters they don't really recognize taking over the episodes they know and love. However, just because your audience views the episode for that reason doesn't mean you should then insult them with an episode that doesn't engage with the stories of its original episodes it references, doesn't even try to make its time travel elements make a lick of sense, and is all around desperate to convince you that modern SpongeBob is something worth having hope in. Oh yeah, so I guess I should answer my question from earlier. Did this episode succeed in making me want to watch the Patrick Star Show? Yeah, a little bit. Really, I don't mind any of these 4 characters. I think they all have potential, and I do want to see what they do in their actual show. Now, this special didn't make me rush to go watch it immediately. Like, it's not high on my list or anything. If the episode were a little better, I probably would have watched a few episodes already. But yeah, as an ad for the Patrick Star Show, this episode kind of succeeded. At least for me. It just would have succeeded a lot more if the writers did a better job. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, you can go to my Patreon, and I also have channel memberships. Also, check out my gaming channel, where I did a video about the SpongeBob movie GBA game.